with the database, how you match the database. That was a really clever way to get to the information. I'm not sure how much you can go into that, but if you want to talk about
I can do it.
Great.
Can I be heard if I'm speaking? Can you hear me?
No.
No, go ahead and use that.
Thank you. If anybody didn't hear, Dr. Reese asked us about the methodology with which we did our speeding cops story that won the Pulitzer Prize a couple years ago. If you didn't see it, we found with absolute certainty thousands of cases of police officers who were not on duty, driving not 10 or 20 or 30 miles over the limit, but 50 miles over the limit on a regular basis all over South Florida. The methodology is actually something that convinced the Pulitzer judges that it was Pulitzer worthy, and that was that we did a public records request for the SunPass transponders. What do you call them? SunPass transponders. Right. Because they were on police cars owned by municipalities, that became public record, right? So if you're a cop and you speed in your own car, we don't know about that. But if you're in a police car going home, that's public record. And then it really just became a question of math. I'm making it overly simple. We have a database expert named John Maines who is really, really good at cleaning up what he calls dirty databases and putting data into a meaningful way that it can be understood. And that's what he did. And he spent months and months and months getting this data into a way that it could be understood and compared. So now you know everybody's speeds. Now you only need to know the distance. Well, the transponder tells you where somebody got in, and it tells you where somebody got off. The distance is absolute. It cannot be debated. So then it just becomes math. What's the miles per hour? You are this distant at that speed. It calculates into miles per hour. Now, we eliminated everybody who's driving 20 miles an hour or more over the limit, figuring boys will be boys. We have no databases on I-95. We have no databases on people who drive home not on the turnpike. And I mentioned before, no databases on anybody who uses his personal car. But we still found thousands and thousands of instances of people driving at outrageous speeds. And that was it. And that's what we published. There was nobody who challenged it because the methodology was so flawless. First thing I did, I studied math in college, and the first thing I did is I attacked the methodology. Can this be right? There's nothing wrong with it. So that's how we got it, and it was just good data work.
Okay. No, I was not. Happily, I'm old, but not that old. No, I was around for that, but I was not there.
Was there any kind of legacy that Butron left in the newsroom, or was it before its time?
You know, I think it was.
Could you clarify what Butron?
Yeah, Viewtron is that home gadget that I showed at the beginning. That was a way that our parent company at the time, Knight Ridder, was developing to try to get news into people's home, not on paper, but through obviously an electronic device. You know, it's hard to know because that was a whole separate kind of entity. And then, you know, the truth is we were on the web too. Knight Ridder was, you know, we were on the web before I think just about anybody else. And it was, again, a separate operation where, like, I remember the Miami Herald actually was the first incarnation of Miami.com was our news site, operating separately within the Miami Herald, but separate staffs, separate. And this was in the I don't know, I think in the I would say in the early 90s. So it was, again, kind of ahead of its time. And boy, people in the main newsroom were not buying into it. You know, we were definitely not collaborating with the folks who were doing that. So, you know, I think it's a lot of the cynicism that now I think we finally have broken through after decades.
We'll meet in the middle. How's that?
So it's perfect that Fusion just popped up on the screen because recently Felix Salmon who works with Fusion, wrote an essay telling young students and young writers that this is a really miserable time to go and become a journalist. So for all the page views and all the innovations in your media organizations, I know we have some former students here who work for you guys, and maybe some students here who would like to work for you guys. So you want to tell them why they should or shouldn't?
May I? Yeah, this will work. I think so, yeah. Well, you know what? This is the best time in history for journalism. Nothing even compares. But it's the worst time to get paid for it. You know, that's the problem. You know, I meet people at cocktail parties and dinner parties, and I tell them what I do, and they're sympathetic because they think I'm about to lose my job. They think we have a problem with readership. We don't. Did you allude? You alluded to this, right? We have more readers than ever because it's so easy to get one of our products. If you don't believe it matters, you know, try getting arrested for DUI, and we'll put it in the paper, and you'll see how much it matters. The problem is the economics of it. So the economic model that has worked for 100 years does not work. We cannot monetize operations of this size just with advertising, and that's why we're doing digital paywalls. Is it a good time to get into the business? It's certainly fun if you do digital interactive graphics, as I showed, and some people in this room do very well. You can have a heck of a lot more fun than when you and I are starting out in the business. You can get a lot more done, you can get a lot more accomplished. But yeah, it's a risky time. So if I had to give advice, it would be that if you want to get into this business, do it because you're passionate about it. But, you know, it might not be a bad idea to have something to fall back on. I mean, I hate to say it, but I know people, well, back in Denver anyway, where two people worked for the Denver Post, and a married couple, and they said one of us is going to get a job somewhere else just in case it hits the fan. That's pragmatic. It's not a bad idea. I don't want to discourage anybody. You never got into this for the money. You did it because of the passion. You thought it was right. You were contributing to the community. Those are all values that should propel you into the business. But, you know, don't be too confident.
I'm going to give a slightly well, I mean, I agree with everything Howard said, but I want to say this. First of all, he alluded to the fact that, you know, no one ever got into journalism because they wanted to get rich. I could tell you that, and I won't tell you what my salary was when I went into the business. So, and I remember that actually in high school, telling a math professor that I was going into journalism, he's like, "You're not going to make any money," and I'm like, "You've seen my grades in math, right? Okay." It's like, so he said, "Really, I don't know what you're talking about." But I would say is that the reality is that this is a great time because it's not just, first of all, there's an explosion in media, and it's not just traditional media. So before the universe was that you either graduated, you'd go and you'd either work for a Miami Herald or a Sun Sentinel, or if your TV was your thing, you'd go that route. And that was pretty much it. Well, now, first of all, TV stations are having to become, are actually having to compete with us and go on the web, and they have to learn, you know, write stories on the web. So they have to, so that's opened up a whole nother thing. There's digital only, tons of digital only and organizations. Organizations like BuzzFeed, which started out with like, you know, cat videos, now have, you know, a very respectable news arm. And so again, there's this proliferation of news media that needs great journalists first, who can write, number two, because it's no longer like, oh, I don't really need to write. I just need to like be really articulate in front of the camera. But now, no matter where you're going to do news, you're going to write. And these are skills that are transferable to other things in case plan A doesn't work out. But I think that at the end of the day, I tell my folks, how many other jobs, unless you go into medicine, and hey, if that's your thing, then I would say, you know, that would be option A. Although you could take some people in the medical profession who are pretty miserable. But, you know, how many days can you walk into a job and maybe you write a brief and you change somebody's life, right? I remember, you know, you write a brief that there's a hit and run, you describe the vehicle, somebody sees it and this really happened, and they get the person who killed someone. So impact in big ways, so it's like a calling. And you either have a calling and you're going to be passionate, or you don't want to work that hard, and then you really do need to go to Plan B.
Can I also address that question? My perspective on that is that with the proliferation of media, media is everywhere, and that means that content is king. And so School of Communication really gives you those skills to do content better than anyone else, better than people who are amateurs, because you're learning to be professional. But the other thing is that any company is a media company. So if you're a plumber, you need to be on Twitter. So any type of company now becomes a media company, and they're looking for professionals as well. So it may not be journalism, but there are careers out there that are developing. There's content engineers that will help you navigate through a museum or an airport, serving you content when you're in different places. So the whole industry is changing in different forms. So I think it's a bright future.
Yes, I will also, I have one more question for you guys, actually. And it sort of spins off of that, because I also believe that there is a bright future, and I think that there's been a lot of looking in the industry to how do we shove a digital model into a print model. And I think the industry is finally coming around to that doesn't work. We have to innovate new solutions. And so, Howard, one of the things that struck me with your presentation was I hear this, I rarely hear this with more legacy tech newspapers, but I do hear it from newsrooms like Vox, and we're going to hear from Trey later. But you called it a reader-first model. Some of us also call it a community-first model. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that looks like as a workflow in your newsroom.
Actually, the digital first, you notice there was no slide with it? Not digital, I keep saying it, the new digital.
Yeah.
There's no slide with it because it's hard to depict. It was a workflow change. At its heart, that's really all it was. Instead of the desks that create content, Metro, Business, Sports, Photo, Features, Entertainment, I'm probably leaving somebody out. Instead of them spending a lot of time with production editors determining what their needs are, they don't even bother with that. So people are coming in a little bit earlier, they're filing much earlier, they're filing in whatever format makes sense to them, and they're just not worried about print production. Later in the day, at around 1 o'clock, and then several intervals after that, the folks who are putting together the print newspaper will look at everything that is coming to them, because things are budgeted with much more precision than ever before, news budgets, so that they know what's coming, and then they can create products based on that. Things don't wait. We get a piece of video, put the video up. The story can get to it, or vice versa. Everything is edited, but the editing is much, much, much faster. So we're starting earlier, getting stuff done earlier, getting stuff done without regard to the number of inches it needs to be to fill a pre-existing hole. Tell the story whatever it needs to be. It sounds simple, but it actually was a complete change in mindset. And by the way, we don't have, with a couple of exceptions of people who are specialists, we don't have web producers. That's something that enabled this new workflow was something that we did 3 years ago, and that is first thing I did when I got in the door is get rid of the digital operation. There is no such thing as digital. There are no silos. If you are a sports writer, you write regardless of the platform. The sports editor of the Sun Sentinel is a sports editor of sunsentinel.com. It's the same guy. So you don't go through a producer. You know, the Metro editor is responsible for the Metro content, regardless of where it is. So you don't have a web production team or a web team to go through. You're the sports editor. It's your sports section.
Right.
Did that answer it? Or was
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Okay.
no, that's great. Although I could keep talking about that for the entire afternoon. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Not many people want to talk about workflow.
I happen to be one of them. Thank you. What a terrific panel from some really